Welcome back to the Eric Krown Crypto channel. Wishing you a happy and healthy start to this nice Tuesday, sunny morning over here from Helsinki, Finland. I'm just making sure that I'm actually recording, which is good because I've had a few issues with that. And more importantly, I want to follow up on the last few days of analysis and of course talk about some big catalysts very likely to come into play today with potentially a major trap in the midst as well. Catalysts being earnings reports for traditional markets, especially today, Tuesday and Wednesday. So I do expect that there is going to be heavy volatility within these next 48 hours, maybe even more on the shorter end of that as well, especially after today's closure for traditional US markets. Anyways, other than that, I should let you know that if you find this content valuable, if you just want to get back, or if you're just feeling charitable, then please do consider hitting the like button. It actually does help. And of course, at the end of the video, if you don't like it, well, then just unlike it and then even dislike it as well. That's good stuff. And will destroy my mood. Anyways, other than that, I should let you know on Instagram, if it's any other account than the one in the link description below, it is not me. I can assure you, I do not have a special secret trading group that I'm going to trade your accounts for. I have my hands full trading my own accounts. And so please be aware that, you're very likely being contacted by scammers if it's not the account that is in the link description below. Other than that, should let you know about Bybit, the good old Bybit shill right there. They got like a $3,000 or $4,000 deposit bonus. There is a link description below. Obviously, moralistically standing, I do have to let you know, or at least I feel like I need to say that, hey, unless you're already a successful trader, it's very unwise to just jump onto a leveraged exchange. What is a better idea is to maybe even employ their testnet account and then test out strategies, back test them, of course, and then figure out if something actually works for you. And then if that is acceptable, then perhaps consider it. Of course, I'm not your dad, so do whatever the fuck you're gonna do. But at the end of the day, let's just jump right into the content. So first and foremost, I want to follow up on the last 24 hours of price action. Then we'll talk about sort of the big thing to be looking for today. So last 24 hours of price action, we're looking for, hey, on CME, probably one more drive to the downside, somewhere around the top end of this blue box territory right here. Almost got there. Close enough is close enough in this case, just down to that low $38,000 region. And then, hey, everything was kind of at extremes at that point. So more likely to bounce before any potential further continuation to that side. And we did say that anywhere around the 382 in this case is fair game. The 382, right, basically where we're at right now at about 40,400 or 40,500 on a closing basis for a daily. And that is actually exactly where we kind of landed. So overall, it's kind of the same thing in the short-term timeframes here as it was yesterday, looking at range resolutions, meaning that if Bitcoin can close a full hour above about 40,800, I would be looking for the next leg up, probably almost $1,000 higher, somewhere around this blue box territory right here. In this case, let me just kind of mark it off right there. There we go. And let's actually, yep. Okay. So we're good right there as well. Anyways, other than that, I do want to express that this would actually be a really good area for a bit of a trap situation. So this is kind of the focus, especially for the day to come. Remember, this past rally, you had a little bit of shorts covering and then also the Twitter news coming in, which, helped general markets, of course. But at the end of the day, earnings reports, I do believe today and tomorrow are probably going to run traditional markets a little bit more, and seeing as there is a high correlation between especially the tech sector and Bitcoin and by extension all cryptocurrencies, if things go south from there in the traditional markets, you're very likely to see them go south in Bitcoin land as well. Anyways, let me actually adjust this for the 4-hour time frame. This was of course relevant for the daily in this case. Let me actually adjust this as well for the 4-hour time frame, marking off that 40,500-ish region. So ultimately, why am I entertaining the possibility of a potential bull trap within this case? Well, if we go over here and start off first with just a fib analysis, you do expect, or at least I expect, traditionally speaking, corrections to the 382 within the context of trending movements. Right now, what do we have? We have lower lows and lower highs. This is a trending movement to the downside, or right around the 4-hour 55 exponential moving average as well. That's that green moving average right there. So, if Bitcoin does start to show signs of slowdown and reversal, that would be, rather nasty. Now, first and foremost, how would we confirm a reversal right here before we get into the actual, data that kind of does suggest that it's a little bit on edge right here? Well, any sort of a full hour closure, especially below 40,100 and change, would do it for me. Could we use an hourly in this case as well? As always, when you use lower term time frames, going to have a lower hit rate, to be fair. But I would say below about 40,000 even, then yes, I would kind of confirm the same thing with targets back down to yesterday's low and probably lower than that throughout the rest of the week. Now, if we go over here into, of course, let me just double check. Yep, there we go. If we go over here into the lower term time frame stochastic momentum, you will very likely notice that stochastic momentum is actually working its way up there right now. And Bitcoin has not even taken out the short term time frame range highs, for example, that being that 40,500-ish region. which at that point would really only imply another move up towards about 41,500 region. That's where things actually do start to change around, however. So I do want to be very, very critical in that, or clear in that, essentially. Anyways, for right now, the 4-hour time frame, actually we'll continue to see upside momentum as long as Bitcoin's above $39,000. That number will naturally change when we get this next closure in 1 hour, 21 minutes, and 40 seconds. So it basically, what is this essentially suggesting? As long as Bitcoin essentially trades sideways here and kind of uses up these lower term time frames, I do look at that as leading into the end of the day today as a potential setup for a major trap. 6 hour going to be showing 38,500 as the magical number. Again, that one will naturally change as well in the next closure. I think CME very, very similar here as well. Let me just double check. And actually, yeah, as far as the number goes, but different posturing as far as where the oscillator itself is. Yeah, 4 hour, same thing as well. Anyways, other than that, very low term timeframes. Compared to that, we do see that 3 hour on both spot and CME is going to start to turn down below about actually on spot about 39,800. So that's very close to that $40,000 precipice, and on CME a little bit lower than that. And then of course the hourly here as well, we do see probably already flipping down actually, but not super concerning. Obviously this is more of a corrective signal, will be remain with downside momentum as long as Bitcoin's closing below 40,600. So in this case, if you see something like this into the end of the day where Bitcoin's kind of going sideways, maybe gives another couple spikes up here, that's fine. And then you see something like this where it comes down below, especially 40,000 in change, then, well, I would be looking for Bitcoin to retest, somewhere around yesterday's lows in the next, 36 to 48 hours, and then very likely make new lows into the next few days. Why is that? Well, we'll get to that in a second, but before I get into that, I should also identify over here that on the funny rates, we do see positive rates on the daily, extremely small, so this is not concerning at all. But if we go down to the hourly, you will notice that it was actually at 0.009 just the last hour, now moving down ever so slightly to 0.008%. Again, we do expect short-term positive rates after a decent rally. I mean, that was like a 5% rally overnight, basically a little bit more than 5% rally. That's significant, certainly, but ultimately, I do feel like the mark's kind of getting a little bit jumpy here off of very little. Anyways, now let's get into the higher term timeframes and why this is relevant and where things start to change. I will start off first with the hopium, of course. The hopium I think is really fucking cut and dry. And honestly, God damn it, and honestly, if this happens, I'm just drawing like random lines. And honestly, if this happens, this would be implying, big price action, very likely into the shallow $50,000 territory. And it's quite literally this, just very, very simply put, if Bitcoin on this week trades above last week's high, which was about $43,000 in both spot and CME, I would confirm this as your next local low. It would be the third higher low in a series of higher lows, and I would essentially increase targets over the coming weeks towards first upper 40s, somewhere around about 47 to 48, and then very likely continuation to about 52, and then very likely deep 50s based off of the other signals that we've been looking for, because these signals are building up and building a rather powerful resolution relatively soon. Until then, do I think that there is more pressure to the downside than not? Well, let's go reference those same timeframes that we were looking at yesterday. Let's go start off over here with the daily. The daily is technically down right now as far as daily stochastic momentum goes. That will not change unless if Bitcoin closes above 40,200 today. So I would go as far to say that if this condition is met today, the Bulaw's hopes stay alive, obviously, in the short term. And, again, a short-term range resolution above that 40,600-ish region. I do look for another move, basically $1,000 higher. And, that's where things can really start to change. Definitely possible. But as long as this condition is not met, which technically speaking right now it's not, although it is, if it closed here, it'd be okay. Pressure does remain to the downside. The reason why I put so much focus on this is going back to this chart over here. This chart over here, as we do see on the daily BBWP, measuring volatility of the dispersion of returns, basically, in layman's terms, like looking at the severity of likely moves incoming, we see the lowest volatility that we've seen on Bitcoin, actually even more now than January. So to compare this with another low volatility segment, I guess we'd have to go back to July of 2020, which was leading up towards like the beginning of Bitcoin's last biblical rally, from like 10,000 to 20,000 and beyond, obviously. Anyways, in this case right here, extremely low for an extremely long time, and we are naturally going to see this expand. It is a mathematical certainty that that will happen, and in the context of the last 10 signals over the past couple of years here, where we've seen even just single digits, not even this low, but single digit percentile moves, or sorry, percentile volatility reads, it has led to, on average, about 20% moves from the expansion of those. Now, that has gone up to as much as almost 30 and a little bit lower than 20% on some of them as well, but ultimately, we could say on average about 20%. And this one, it would be relevant and logical to say that it's probably going to be more just because it's been lower for longer. So what can we then use to get a bit of a bias on direction as my voice cracks like and it's very embarrassing. Well, as you can see over here, the daily stochastic momentum has actually, or I've done a back test on it, and it's actually gotten the correct direction off of that volatility expansion for 8 out of the last 10 iterations. 8 out of the last 10 iterations. So decent enough hit rate. And what does that essentially say? It essentially says that as long as this is still angled to the downside, which it is right now, although that'll change if Bitcoin closes above 40,001 or basically 40,200, let's say. And shit, even if you see the lower term time frames above 46, I mean, that would be, that would be pretty good. Then yes, the downside does have a higher probability, statistically speaking, of, of initiating from here over time. And because, on average, we've seen about a 20% move from the level of volatility expansion, that would imply price action up to $48,000 if it does get resolved to the upside. To the downside, somewhere around 33. Now, obviously, this is a bit of an estimation, depending upon where we see that expansion come from. If you want to go by the book, or, if you want to do exactly right here, then be like, I don't know, about 32-ish or something. But regardless of that, just kind of giving some generalized targets to expect over the coming weeks once we actually get this volatility expansion. What will denote volatility expansion on a time frame like this? We need to see the daily BBWP get a positive slope and above the moving average on it. It's similar to these last moves over here, and it typically happens rather fast once you get that expansion. So let's say that Bitcoin does close basically below $40,000 today on the daily. I would feel very, very comfortable and confident calling a major trap right here with targets back down to the lows of this current week, and probably lower than that over time as well, as Bitcoin does kind of play off of these same ranges that we've been looking at right here. The next one to the downside still around about $37,000 on a break of our current lows of this week, which I imagine there'd probably be a short-term bounce there, at least. So with that in mind, not much has changed right now. And also to reference the 5-day, which I won't go through the full rigmarole on this, but for the people who have been following along on this channel for the past couple months here, the signal is still very much relevant. We just got another 5-day closure, and actually, and for the 5-day BBWP, because of the way that it closed last night, it's actually going to continue to contract. So at this point, I actually don't think that we're going to see the resolution of this at least for another 5 days. So yeah, that signal still relevant, but I don't think it's going to be relevant at least for another 5 days. And for what it's worth, the 5-day stochastic momentum is still heading down here as well, as long as Bitcoin's below $46,000. The beautiful thing is, though, is that if the daily signal does lead to the upside, it'll very naturally, or very, very likely naturally lead and bleed into the 5-day signal, which would then have targets much higher, namely around the deep 50s and low $60,000 territory. So I do want to represent the hopium still well here. It's just as long as Bitcoin is not above these regions, I do look at it as more statistically likely to break to the downside. And I think that's probably a good place to kind of leave off on this video. Basically, that is to say, hey, if you see Bitcoin close below about $40,000, even on a 4-hour time frame, it's probably going to be a good indication that this is going to be the next nice short-term bull trap with targets lower. And if Bitcoin does close above 40,600, it keeps the short-term, medium-term hopium alive. I would increase targets up to 41.5 or so. And then above 41.5, things start to look actually quite good for the medium term with very likely retesting last week's high. That obviously leads into that other potential hopium signal with trading above last week's high, having targets higher, plus that volatility expansion, which is rather likely in these next 48 hours, which would have targets at around 48 to 50,000 bucks, and perhaps onwards and forwards from there. So that's still what's kind of at stake right here. Other than that, I really don't have too much to add. Do we have anything on the 4-hour RSI? No, not really. I mean, you'll have a little bit of hidden bearish evidence building up, but yeah, again, it kind of all hinges on the short-term timeframes, like at minimum below about 40,000 bucks. Preferably on an hourly closure, but preferably on a 4-hour, but an hourly probably does it as well. Although, anytime you use lower time frames, you're not gonna have as high of a hit rate. Anyways, I think that this is gonna be a good place to kind of leave off on this one. I want to wish you well, take care, and see you hopefully soon.